Welcome to More Than a Lumpy Jumper, the podcast where we talk leadership, life and lessons learned, often the hard way. This season, we're journeying around the wheel of life, a simple but powerful coaching tool that helps us notice the different parts of life that shape our sense of balance. Now, today's episode is Being Becoming, where we're exploring personal development. Growth is natural, but it's rarely linear, and development isn't about polishing ourselves to perfection. It's about returning to wholeness, noticing who we are becoming, and choosing growth over comparison. And we couldn't be happier to welcome today's guest, Neena Sims. Neena is a coach, facilitator, poet, and mother with more than 20 years of experience of designing learning programs that weave together systemic wisdom, creativity, and embodied practice. A former actress and director, Neena brings play, sensory awareness, and body-based approaches into her work. She is trained as a practitioner of tension and trauma-releasing exercises, and she's known for her ability to help people step into freedom of expression and vulnerability, the kind of space where real transformation happens. Neena lives with her family and her glorious little dog Percy in a village in the east of England, where she also hosts and gathers what she calls fellow pilgrim souls. Neena Bambina, welcome.
Yay! Neena's in the house.
Neena's in the house.
Oh God, what an introduction. What a welcome.
Do you like it?
Glorious.
What kind of dog is Percy?
He is a Scrappy-Doo mongrel,
Okay, Heinz 57.
like Spaniel, Jack Russell and Poodle, and he's such a good soul. That's who he is.
Oh.
He's right here.
Oh.
He's doing a model of how to personally grow by just relaxing, basically.
He really is. He's a fellow pilgrim soul. And he comes up alongside you and he sort of like stretches himself over you and he's like, hello, I think I quite like you. He's so sweet. I love him. He gets alongside people as well, doesn't he? Which is a lovely segue into us actually getting started on what this podcast is meant to be about. We should have called it Percy's podcast, which would have also been incredibly interesting. And that means that Neena will have to come back again and talk on behalf of Percy. But in the meantime, let's talk growth. Now.
Oh, crikey. There's an invitation.
She's not asking much, is she?
Exactly, yeah.
Neena, there was so much in that intro because you have done so much. So when we talk about being, becoming and growth, from actress to director to doing all the things that you now do, I'm just wondering if you're able to take us on a wee canter through life.
Well, I'm just going to say the first thing that's right here to say, which is that I'm just noticing in this moment, like your introduction, the way you've chosen to describe me and my life is quite a thing, in the sense of I go, oh God, is that me? Yes, it is. I can feel it, but also it's like seeing it afresh or something. And I feel like on this topic of personal growth, I think it matters to me to feel that in this moment, because I just think that even though we say personal growth, it's never in isolation. Like we're never really in that. How could we be alone? Because we're such relational beings. I think that's what we are, actually. We're built of relationship to self, to others, to our environment, all of that. Anyway, so I feel like a thrill somehow in being asked that question, like, how have you got here? And part of me wants to go, I don't know. Oh my God. Well, it's been a winding path. And a quick canter, if I just kind of go really pragmatic on it, a quick canter was way back when at school. And Bobby, I can't even remember if we've ever said this before. We've done a podcast before that we were at school together. I thought I was going to follow my family's wishes, I'm going to say, which was that science was all and vocational training was all. And I thought I was going to tread along on a thing to becoming something like a physiotherapist or something like that, which would have been wonderful, I'm sure, in its own right. But I read a poem when I was 17 called Tintin Abbey by Wordsworth, and my world turned upside down. And I realized that I needed to go and study English literature and drama, both of which were profound passions of mine. And I found my way into working in theatre, as you say, acting and directing. But along that way, I'd also done some teaching, and I found out by taking that step into teaching, which life kind of threw at me because I needed to pay off some debt, that I loved teaching and I loved being with people in their learning. And I really missed it. As much as I love theatre, I really missed it. So then I started to do some of that through my theatre work by running a kind of summer school for adults and children. And then I was invited by my dad to consider taking that work into businesses, which way back then I thought they'd never be interested in. It's funny now because it's like a really well trodden path now to take theatre into business and all of that. And I found my way into the world of organizations and then got super interested in learning within organizations and went down the training route, running training courses, which I loved, combined performance, learning, and being with people. But there was something it felt like calling me, which was actually what has growing and learning stick as opposed to just being a one-off event or a kind of form of entertainment or something, which is after about 3 or 4 years how these courses started to feel. And I went on this search for something that would feel more like a way of supporting people in some kind of lasting, well, to our word today, becoming of themselves. And that led me to discover integral development coaching and all the world of work that I'm in now, which is approaching adult development from this integrated way that you described so beautifully, Bobby, right back at the beginning of working with the body and emotions and relationship and environment and all of those things. So I don't know, is that potted enough? Perhaps a bit longer than potted, but that's a counter through.
I love that, and I think that it brings forth a really great distinction, because just listening to you then and you know, the people who listen to this and who even don't but know me as well know that I also, from a training to a coaching perspective, have done something different. But that distinction between taking training in and sheep dipping people in an organisation. Oh, we've all got to do such and such topic. Dip, and then the trainer whisks off, and then if you're lucky, you may well have been asked to come back 6 months later to review, but the dip has worn off. Versus organisations that really want to work on the growth and development of people, who will keep that not dipping, but just keeping them immersed almost, and showing them ways.
But not waterboarding them, obviously. We're not talking about waterboarding.
Clearly not. No, we're not. Thank you for bringing that up, Bridget. But maybe with my coaching, because you know there may well be a level of that. Not with Neena's, which is why we've got her on as the expert. But I think here's the thing that Neena's talking about as well, in becoming, if you're helping people, you have to leave them able to help themselves. And I think that then takes us into the next bit for you, with whatever that has brought forward for you. And I think I was saying it's not linear, that we weave around all over the place. But what that has been like for keeping you in the growth. And sometimes when, I mean, I don't know about you and I don't know about Bridge, but I think growth is sometimes fucking uncomfortable. And I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. But I think I've also said to you, Neena, in the past, that once you actually start down this growth and this development of self, you can't shut the lid on it again.
Oh, yeah. And it's really interesting because I was listening to your first podcast, you know, where you introduce this whole rich kind of smorgasbord of the wheel. And I was thinking, like, what is it? You know, like, in essence, what is the invitation in the wheel? You talk about it. I felt like I got so much. So I want to thank you both from that first episode, because it wasn't just talking about the way it worked, but the nuance, and Bridget, particularly your direct experience of using it. And I was thinking, you know, maybe what the wheel is in some way is a kind of conscious way of allowing ourselves to be interrupted by encountering our life in different ways and in different categories. Because sometimes life just comes along and interrupts us anyway. I was just sharing with Bridget that I was meant to be in Iceland this weekend, and the airline has gone bust. Now, I was thinking in the financial realm, people, big things happen. That's a minor thing, really, for me, in a sense. But I was thinking, like, people go bankrupt. They have a massive interruption. They lose their job in that realm. Something happens in the physical health realm, which is a huge interruption. And we could name them, community. They have a spiritual crisis. Like, those things come uninvited. And it feels to me like what you're inviting us all into by bringing this through your podcast season is kind of, can we be awake to the possibility of interruption that doesn't have to take the carpet from under us when it's happening?
I love that, because I think you're right. I think the majority of people who come to coaching, or, few people just suddenly go, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to have a look at my life wheel. They do it normally through some kind of coaching intervention, but it is because there is something that's happened to them, whether they have, decided that they need to sort out their love life or their career or their finances. And as you said, most of the time it is because there's been something like that that's taken the floor out underneath you, something that's been a bit, well, uncomfortable, to say the least. And actually, you're right. We're trying to introduce the wheel in a gentle way to say, hey, stuff can be fine, but you might want to tweak some stuff. And so let's not only do these life audits when something goes horribly wrong. We can design our lives a little bit better. And whether that's co-creating with a coach, or whether that's from a YouTube video or listening to a podcast, I think you're right. Certainly, I think we were both excited about this season.
Yeah.
Also, I wasn't totally joking about that. I was going to be listening and using stuff because I am trying to make some changes, and not because, everything is terrible, but just because I kind of want to move in a slightly different direction. And some things I thought, oh, I'm going to just, we'll get some coaches in, I'll get some free coaching. Awesome. And I think it's nice that we can do it in this way, in this gentler way, rather than where it is because something went badly wrong. And sometimes it's difficult to get through that part, isn't it? That, something's terribly wrong and, oh my God, I'm a 2 on this and I need to be a 10 or I need to be an 8. But as Bobby had talked about in episode 1, sometimes we just want to move from a 5 to a 6, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we just want to have some ideas of some of the little tweaks we could do that would just make the difference between it being an okay day and it being a tra-la-la-la-la day. So I haven't listened to today's, was it today? I haven't listened to episode 1. It was a while ago when I edited it, but it's nice to hear that insight as to what you got from that episode. So I'm really pleased.
Can I just come in on that as well? There's a couple of things. The first thing is really facile, but it's just been making me chuckle, and I feel in the safest space to actually say it now, because whilst you wanted to get good ideas for yourself to support your wheel bridge, I just wanted to be able to start saying the wheel like Danny Dyer. And that was the only reason that I actually wanted to do this in the first place. So I could just go, oh, the wheel, and then carry on. So that was the first thing I was going to say. So like a ghastly interruption into this very deep way that we're talking about it. So let me get back there. Because I think with coaching that sometimes we as coaches are supporting somebody because they have had this massive interruption. The other way that I like to think about it, in particularly, well, with teams in particular, but this can be done individually with leaders as well, is that sometimes people and teams need an interruption, because, just talking with a team recently, that they're wondering why they're not being effective as a team, and they just have one monthly team meeting, which is always agendarized, and they never do anything different. And so what a coach can also do is be the creator of the interruption, or as some people think with me, the disruption. But sometimes it's required, because things won't change in a team or on the wheel. So I also would like to invite the people who are listening to the podcast to think, where they've just settled, and whether they really are that comfortable in it, or what are the other possibilities if they gave themselves a little bit of a nudge in a particular segment?
That's a great provocation, because I think that the other thing that you're doing by engaging and revisiting the wheel, Bridget, you were talking about like coming back to it, noticing that you're probably on a different day, you might experience it differently. And certainly, wouldn't it be fascinating to look at it in a year's time or something and see? But the thing that struck me as well, to this point about consciously engaging, is that you are cultivating the capacity, Bobby, for exactly what you're talking about, to both self-generate good disruption and to be able to tolerate disruption even when it comes uninvited by engaging in this way. And, I also think, as I say that, I think, oh God, it sounds so up your own arse, Neena, because who would invite disruption? And it is true that we don't always want it, and it isn't always manageable. So I'm not trying to be lightweight about it, but most of us will. And I didn't in any way want to sidestep your original question, Bobby, which you said, what kind of interruptions? And I'm really happy to talk about any and all of them. But, you can include ones which is like a recurring grief about the loss of my brother that happened very early on. And then things like having children, as joyous as it is, big disruption, getting married, being in a long-term relationship, all the ups and downs of that. I happen to have been self-employed for a very long time, but whether you're employed or self-employed, the world of work is rich with disruption, feelings of acceptance, feelings of rejection, feelings of I'm not good enough, feelings of, all of that. And I would say, so on small and large scales, I think I've experienced many, many, many. And one thing I would say is that being open to growing from those. And again, that can sound like a proper platitude, can't it? People talk also about post-traumatic growth. It is a real observable thing, but I would never wish to say, oh, let's all wish terrible things upon ourselves so we can grow. No. But it is possible that these things can be openings if we have enough support and the conditions to step into them. And so this sort of gentle visit round the wheel, I think, gets us fit. It's like building a muscle just for being a bloody human.
I have a real visual going on for that. The world can be like this. I talk about like peaks and troughs, stars and troughs. There's the star moments in our lives, and then there's trough moments, whatever they might be. So that's going on like that. And then, like you say, there's this muscle that whilst it's not linear, there's something that we can be doing, whatever the situation, that keeps us grounded. And that's why with the wheel, it's not necessarily that can always be the same all the time. But I suppose, I don't even know where I'm going with this really, but I'm going to try it, because the other thing is that sometimes we can be the one that are creating the stars and troughs while things are more solidified. Does that make sense? So that it can turn itself on its head, that we're actually the ones doing it rather than it being done to. So it's the what are we doing for ourselves? And, Neena, when we're talking about mind, body, heart, the whole shebang, there's all of the things that you bring to that, which I think are the things that help us build the muscle in this area that we can take into other areas of the wheel. So say I was the airline. I know that's a really bizarre thing, but say I was the airline that you were actually working in. So here I am, and as the airline, I've gone completely bust. And we've been saying this in other recordings now, because none of those segments ever work by themselves. So as a result of me as the airline going bust, I have lost my community of travellers. I'm seen in a particular way. The stress that's being caused from the finances can have an effect on relationships, can have an effect on love, can have an effect on our health. And so whichever segment that you are in, there is definitely the impact that it is being felt in other areas. And so And I think we were saying this with Lida, who we recorded with recently. If you look to the self first, that's the anchor point, your inner working, that supports whatever other segment that you're actually working in. And the interesting thing is, of course, when we talked to James about health and nutrition, he said if you start with that, it can affect all of the others. So, I mean, for me, looking at the wheel, it doesn't matter where somebody wants to start, but to see the impact of where it can take you in other elements of the wheel. But I do think that this inner work to be able to self-generate and to be able to self-regulate and look after yourself emotionally and bodily and cognitively, whichever way we want to look at it, with the work that you do in coaching, I think can support all else. And if I was the bust airline, I'd want to know what my resilience was like and what work I'd done on myself and my growth to be able to deal with that catastrophe.
I looked at it in a slightly different way when you were talking about how sometimes we create our own peaks and troughs. And I think that though there's an element of this, even if you're on an even keel, so we're not peaks and troughs, most growth, as you've said, I think you've both said, there is an element of discomfort generally.
Mhm.
It's difficult to grow without, and it doesn't have to be trauma induced, but there is an element of moving away from the norm. And so I think when you are resilient and you have, as you said, this grounding in yourself, it is easier to go, I'm just going to flick this a bit. That sounds wrong, rude. Sorry. Oh dear. Anyway, yeah. Okay, damn it. Trying not to corpse now. Anyway, trying to push that. I can't. Let me just calm down a minute. But to move. Okay, breathe. To just decide to tip the balance somewhere so that you go, okay, I mean, everything's easy or feels sort of balanced or sometimes boring, depending on how you view it. I'm going to do something that's going to push one of these sectors. I'll take a risk with my finances, or I will take a new job or completely change. And it doesn't have to be that extreme, but just to go, oh, you know what? I don't know many people in my community, and I've got a little bit of a small community here, but maybe I want to grow my community. Or in terms of my education or my self-development, I have never tried this, and actually maybe this will be something that I'm not going to use the F word, but you push a little thing to balance out. And that can be then set like a whole ripple of other things,
Yeah.
deciding to do education, taking a risk on something can actually impact on your finances because it can cost money and it takes time away from your family or any of those things. And so even when you're fairly balanced, you can decide to just push some things to start the sine wave, cause the ripple, create the wobble. No flicking.
No flicking. The wheel.
And what this is making me think about is also like, for the sake of what would we do any of this really? Like, I know you've asked me on for the kind of personal growth bit of the pizza pie on the wheel, as it were. And I'm just thinking in response to your thing, Bridget, about pushing or flicking or whatever we're doing. And of course, when you change anything in a system, and we're a system in a system of our families and our cultures and everything else, everything moves. So everything is sort of feedback to how it feels, to our way of being, to our becoming. And I was thinking, well, like if you drew the circle, a big pizza, and Bridget, you said something really funny in the first one of these when you said, I want to be a 10, and then you kind of revised that. So no, I don't. But I think there's an assumption, isn't there? I don't, maybe not. Maybe this is just me, where you kind of think, well, balance would be being the circle. I would be kind of in my finances and in my health, everything would be scoring a 9 or a 10 or whatever your score would be, as though you're some sort of project in perfection, or as though that was even in existence. And that's a kind of story, isn't it, as well, like that we could experience balance. So when I was thinking about, for the sake of what would we do this, what might that look like? Whatever shape you drew. Like if you have you ever done this exercise of the wheel where you have somebody draw like where they score themselves and then they draw, they connect them and they see that there can be real imbalance. Like if you look at mine, by the way, I did the exercise.
I was a blancmange. I was like a blancmange. It was all over the shop.
A while ago, probably a different wheel, but related. And they said, imagine trying to drive your cart on a wheel that shaped, as a way of feeling into your life.
Yeah.
I know. And I get the point.
You mean like the Flintstones? You know the Flintstones, the cartoon, and that with the stone cut thing.
Based on my score for fitness, my cart wouldn't even bloody move, which is feedback. And that's been really useful to look at. And having said that, I thought, so what is this then? What gets revealed by doing it? Like, many things get revealed, but why would we do it? And I thought to myself, well, I think your blancmange shape, Bobby, or Bridget, whatever shape you are with your finances and work out at an 8, there might be other things that are like, that's the shape of us. And I wondered about maybe the way I would work with this for myself. And I feel really inspired by you, like to bring this into work with clients as well, more and more, is about what's my healthiest, life-giving shape, which will be totally unique and changing all the time, to your point, Bobby, of becoming. Like, the shape is becoming all the time, and we're not a project. We're not a bloody project. But we are a set of unfolding, erupting life. And in service of being the biggest expression of our life as life comes through us, I think this is really rich.
But we talked about training at the beginning and that sheep dippy type of effect to it. And that throws me all the way back, all those years ago when I sort of like first left the army and was in my first training role. And you may well be doing a particular topic that's useful to managers, useful to leaders, whatever that might be. But the number of people who would say, oh, I don't need to do that because I've done it before. I did it in another organisation. I've got nothing to learn here. And it just sort of like intrigues me all of a sudden to wonder what would be going on for them in their wheels if we think that we can actually fix them and they're going to stay like that. Because again, even if we were talking about a sheep dippy topic, just because you've done it 2 years before somewhere else, it isn't going to be the same experience that you have now. And if you then take that forward into what we're now talking about not sheep dipping, but about becoming, the whole thing about that is that every time we are doing something, that wheel is ebbing and flowing. It's sort of like there's this concertina effect to it. So that, I'm thinking about being out in my other location for 3 weeks. I haven't been to the gym. Terrible. I've still eaten quite well, but I haven't picked up a weight or whatever. So what's that doing to the element of the wheel and quite how is my body feeling and how is that making me feel about myself? But again, you put yourself in a different environment, the wheel changes. Circumstances, the people you are with change, the wheel changes. And I guess our practice is about being able to go with that, but with some level of awareness as to what's actually happening.
I was thinking that's such an excellent example, Bobby. So I get very curious about what can you feel from the inside of your degrees of a sense of belonging in your body or purposefulness or freedom or delight, like all of those things. Like, what can you feel from not having exercise? Not like a punitive thing, because we could get into self-criticism here.
Oh, when you let the brain take over, all I'm doing is panicking that I'm going to put on 3 stone in 3 weeks, that I'm going to go back to the size that I actually was. So there's something else that has to come into my growing and my becoming of, let's just get sensible about what that is and be gentle on myself, that if I'm here and it's warm and I don't want to include the gym in my day, then don't eat pizza every day, or feed myself in a different way. But I also know that my body is sort of like feeling the loss of it because it becomes such a part of it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to and I'm looking forward to just chilling out a bit as well. And then that's trying to take it all into account rather than letting the head take over and spending every morning on the scales just hoping to hell that I haven't gone and done something terrible to myself.
And this, I think, is bringing up for me a very important distinction. I think that when any of us engage with this wheel, that we do it from a place of kindness, truthfulness, but also kindness. Because I noticed when I was doing it, I thought, oh, which part of me is talking right now? Because I can do this from a place of self-criticism. I can fill this wheel out, or I can fill it out from a wishful thinking point of view.
10.
And
Yes. Or I can fill it out just from my sense of my inner sense. And actually, when I did that, I was really surprised by a couple of these scores. And I haven't tried to actually analyze it yet. But I thought, goodness me, that's interesting. I would have thought I'd score higher for fun and recreation.
oh, you're not fun.
Yeah. So it's just interesting. If I can now look at that, maybe get some help, like from friendly people to help me think that through. I don't think we have to do this on our own either. Because
Yeah, that's nice.
our own sense of this is only one perspective. What other people experience about us is also a truth. So I thought,
I wonder whether we should stop calling it a wheel, because I really liked your point about this is your shape.
I was a splat.
Okay, this is your shape. If we join it all up, whether it's a blancmange or a splat or a beautiful star or whatever it is, because us assuming that, because when we call it the wheel, there is this sort of assumption that it was supposed to end up as a project. And then I was thinking, have you ever seen fractals?
yes.
Fibonacci numbers, and this whole thing about that nature is fractals, and nothing is, even if you look at the outline of the United Kingdom and you go deeper and deeper, and the closer and closer and closer and closer you look, the less perfect, the less it's not like a line. It's all these tiny, tiny little inlets, and the closer you get, there's more inlets and more inlets and more inlets, and there's a beauty in that shape. But it's not a circle. It's not a perfect line. It's not a perfect triangle, whatever it is. And so I love fractals. I went through a phase where I was absolutely obsessed with fractals, and I love that nature isn't perfect, right? And it's like snowflakes. And snowflakes are fractals too, and every single one is different, and every single one is beautiful. So I really like that idea, that thought that's now stuck in my head, is that this is your shape.
Yes.
And you are that shape, and that's great. And that shape may change, and snowflakes change and they grow, and when there's ice they kind of turn into extra double snowflakes, and then they may melt a little bit. I don't quite know where I'm going with that, but because that, I'm not suggesting we're just going to melt, but I do think that we should stop trying to all be circles.
I love the fact as well that when you think about it from a wheel perspective, there's like forward motion. And I know that, everything is moving or everything is changing, but the idea of it being a shape that isn't static, but is sort of like breathing itself bigger or moving in different parts of the segment and moving out elsewhere, gets you back to that inner self, the self fluctuating and being able to blend with whatever is occurring around them, rather than this perfect wheel that's sort of like shunting itself through or jolting its way through it, almost like trying to get away from it rather than actually being with it. It sort of like feels more like it's with it, it's part of. And that then says, if we actually see it from that perspective, the days or the seasons when we're shedding, because we've done an episode before about shedding a skin because it no longer serves us, or something that has happened that has allowed us to blossom. Shedding and blossoming can be equally uncomfortable, but it's about the root of the shape that you're actually creating from to handle and welcome the discomfort because of what can happen next.
Well, this is, I think both of you feels to me the thing that's getting fired up by both of you speaking just now is that we are, very obvious thing to say, but part of nature. I think we often think of ourselves as separate or different or sort of, the rules don't apply to us. But to your point, Bridget, about everything being like fractals and the nature of natural things, and Bobby, you're like, what happens to us in response to other stimulus? And you talked about this last time, like be it your environment or be it your work. I think the shape of us changes in relationship to others, to the world. And I was thinking about this, like we so often treat ourselves, I'm sure you two have got into talking about this, in a mechanistic way, whereas we're much more like a plant or a tree than we are like a computer, despite all the metaphors that are used about our brains and things. And if you think about something like a tree, it's like it is itself, and it has a particular kind of shape that will probably take, and that shape will be different for every single tree in relation to the wind, in relation to the kind of soil it grows in relation to the amount of sunlight it gets. And so the other thing I feel here is this sort of, again, bringing a conscious touch, if you like, to conditions. Can we participate in having the conditions of our own growth and becoming and unfolding, like an oak tree, be healthy and rich? And I then think that we are condition making for others in our lives. And so by participating in this way, I think that's a big gift to the world and to other people.
And we've talked about cycles, right? Because it's cyclical as well, this idea of growth. And, going back to the fractals, there's a great book by James Gleick called Chaos. So chaos theory is related to fractals. And much as a lot of my life often feels chaotic, and I feel that maybe, I judge myself for that a lot. But then I have to remember that nature is chaos. We are all creatures of chaos. Nothing is perfect. That's why, maybe the wheel is the wrong analogy for what we're doing when we do this life auditing exercises, because the wheel, the circle, seems to be a little bit perfect. And, but apart from me, I don't know anyone else who is perfect. And the life splat, that sounds rude too. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking I've got to go back now, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to do for the rest of the series if we're not calling it the wheel anymore. I'm also thinking I've got to change all of the creatives that I've created for this thing as well. I'm going to have to work out how AI will turn it into a splat of segments. The life splat. Yay! It's come and flick your life splat. Oh God, no, that's just all gone horribly wrong. Bridget, this is all you're doing.
Bobby.
You won't get to say, what was it? Wheel. Well, how did you say it?
The wheel. Have you heard Danny Dyer? Wheel.
The wheel. Let's try and work this round so you can keep the wheel.
Now we've deconstructed it. Let's try and put it back before the end of the episode. God.
Just for the sake of Bobby's illustrations. I mean, come on.
Exactly. No, I think everything we've said is valid. And I also think, of course, in many spiritual traditions, a circle is the symbol of perfection. But our problem is that we have, sorry, this is a big brand thing to say. Talk about a bloody sweeping generalization. What we have done. But I think culturally what we have done is we've taken perfection and the idea of perfection and made it into a weapon, because it's got collapsed with other big cultural narratives like achievement and performance and all of those things, and there being something wrong with us or something wrong with what we're doing. And so perfection becomes this place we're trying to get to, rather than really an appreciation for who we are and what we are. Because to your point, Bridge, I don't think that when, you don't look at one snowflake and say it's more perfect than another.
No, they're all beautiful.
They're all just perfect. I think we have to reclaim perfection and the circle, but know that it's not about trying to get anywhere, if you know what I mean. In that sense, the car isn't taking us anywhere, but it is process. There is movement. And that does happen on a in that circular way and in spiral ways. It's not linear. So maybe you could reclaim it. I don't know. How am I doing?
I think that might work. It might work. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to just have to thank you for destroying our series. But I think it's a great question, for us to be exploring, because it sort of like says we can show up whatever shape we are. And that's okay. I like that.
And maybe there's a mind shift about this idea that perfection is about achievement, is about, it becomes competitive. And so there is a little element of, if you've got someone who is very competitive, Bobby, and myself, to be honest, I don't know why you're making that face. Come on,
Needing to be a 10.
that's true. But
I wasn't the one that insisted on being a 10 at everything when we first started this. Thank you very much.
we need to be tens because then we win at life. And I think that that's maybe is one of the things that you need to put into the caveat when you're sort of explaining or going through the wheel with people, or you're doing it yourself, is to remind yourself that it's not a competition, that actually everyone is going to be different, and it's not about achieving a 10 in every single sector. Because when I kind of think about it, I think that would be kind of a boring, like, yeah, I'm a 10 at everything.
Oh, well, very tiring as well.
Yeah. And then there's nowhere to go.
But I think just to be curious about, which I was very curious when you were laughingly saying I want to be a 10 at everything, because the questions have got to be, and it's just interesting, why do you think you need to be a 10 at everything?
Because I viewed it as a competition. It was a challenge. I saw the wheel as a challenge. Let's make everything a 10. And of course, having discussed it and listened to wiser women than myself, I realized that was, and also I had a massive hangover, so I wasn't really thinking.
She was being very grumpy on the first episode, honestly.
That's so funny. Massive hangover, I think, wasn't it? I loved how honest you were
Yeah,
about that.
I did have a massive hangover.
This is so interesting, though, Bridge, what you're saying about, so just even being presented with the wheel, you notice that a tendency you have is to go to, I'm going to win at this, or that's the objective. So the kind of story that you have with engaging with it. And as I was looking at it, I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating as part, this is an invitation to anybody listening, because I want to do this, is I was thinking, what is my relationship to each of these segments? What's the story I have about them? I mean, the same way you had the story about the wheel and what it is. But if you even take it down a level, what's the story that we have about work? Who has my life so far, taught me I need to be at work? And what do I think about finances? What's the story I'm telling myself about me and finances, about the world and finances, or about physical health? I noticed that one, which is really low for me, is I have a big story. I'm so unfit, and now I'm 55. Oh God, if I go out, I'll probably injure myself, which is I have done. I've got some grounding for that, But I notice I'm building up a big fat story, and I go, God, it's just one interpretation of this. So I suppose I was thinking how exciting it would be as part of the exercise, if people want to do it, to really get honest with yourself about what's your story about each of these segments and how it applies to you. Does it apply to you? What's your engagement with it? Where did you learn that? You know what I mean? I'm grateful because I hadn't really thought about engaging with it that way. But there was something that came out of your conversation that had me wonder about that.
I think that's so true, because if I'm sat here settling to that now, when I'm going, I really only need to get from a 5 to a 6. I think I need to go back and revisit it and go, is that just my limiting belief that's actually getting in my way? Or have I, for whatever reason, disregarded it, thinking that it's not important, but what am I losing as a result of not seeing it as important? Or is it okay? But, it's the going past the scoring mechanism to actually really then unpack. And again, I think that's what we're hoping the episodes will do, for people to go, oh, hang on a minute. What really were we thinking about here?
I love that idea, and I am going to go back and look at it without a hangover, but try and look at it. Just take a sector a day or a sector a week or whatever, and start to really sort of pull some of it apart. Because I think that sometimes for example, if we look at the finance sector, often people just go, I just want to have more money or have more financial stability. But actually, if you start to think about it, some people may just need a better relationship with money rather than just need more money. But actually, why do you think money is problematic? And many people, particularly women, and I met an amazing coach who talked specifically about that, about, many people just go, oh, I'm rubbish with money. Like, as you said, it's the same with fitness. I just can't manage money. I don't understand it. I either spend it all, I just fritter it away and I just never know what to do. And, that's just the way. And a lot of that will come from family, relationships with money. If you've been brought up in a house of poverty, or if you've been brought up where money has never been an issue, so you've never had to worry about it, so you actually have never had to manage it.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of really interesting things that come out of that idea of let's just focus on a sector rather than achieving the perfect tens around the wheel. So I love that idea. That's going to be my some homework for me. So thank you, Neena.
No, you're welcome. Now, what you've just said made me think, God, wouldn't it be interesting to do that for every part of the wheel? And then also notice the dominant common something. Do you know what like the common is there? Maybe there isn't, but is there a certain fundamental thread of what's my relationship to
Yeah.
this? So, for example, narratives like sacrifice. Like it's my job in my work to do a job that has me sacrifice myself. It's my job it's my role in the world to have work that doesn't really pay me that well. It's my job to have relationships where I'm the one always giving. Do you see what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just talking about myself there.
I didn't know that we were meant to be helping you today, Neena, but I'm so glad that we have managed to uncover this for you.
Come in, the psychoanalyst. No, but that's interesting too, because there'll be
Yeah.
things which, to your point, Bridge, will be learned as well from our family cultures, from our wider culture in each of these realms. And then there may even be this thread that if we worked there, might be really exciting. Just in the spirit of because we are an ever becoming shape that can be of service in the world. And the more we have this full self-expression rather than the sort of shape that was given to us or thrown to us, the more we can be available in the world and in experience, meaning and contribution and delight and all of those things.
It's a great way for us to reflect on for episode 12, actually, Bridge. I've written it down so we don't forget.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But we've talked so much about how all of the sectors are interrelated as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, maybe that interrelationship is driven by maybe one central or two central thoughts or behaviors or things that we have. And so absolutely that if you look at it in that way, it may be that you don't go, oh, I'm going to work on this in my finance, I'm going to work on this, but actually I'm going to work on this belief that impacts on all of these. So yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Look at the time. No one's going to want to listen to us whittering on.
Ooh. Have we really got to stop? Keep going.
No, but I was going to say, to your point about you can work in the different places and because they all impact each other, this is not to say that even if you find some central thing which would actually move the dial on everything if you chose to work on it in a supported, but with both support and challenge, but the practices, the little tweaks in each of them are still so relevant because they're working on the whole. But if you had that central one or two things, you could really then and hone your observations.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, Neena, I always love to have you on as a guest. You're brilliant.
I think we should just have her on as a 3. You need to come to all of the things and we could just take a back seat. It'd be great.
Brilliant.
Yeah. No, these things only happen in relationship. That's one thing I do also know about myself, is you both, for example, are wonderful condition makers. Seriously. The very fact that you've created this and then how you are and how relaxed you are, it makes so much come forward. There was so much here that I mean, I didn't sort of have a big plan anyway, but I had no idea that all this was going to come forward. So it's thrilling what can happen when you're together. Love it.
We quite like it too, don't we, madam? 10!
You do. Yeah, you do.
Real.
Flick.
God. Right, before this completely deteriorates, shall I finish us off? That sounds wrong as well with my quote. God's sake. Now, this one, for once, I think is actually relatable. I love the book by Glennon Doyle, Untamed. And so the quote is, and I think this really does fit with some of the stuff we've been saying, thank God. The truest, most beautiful life never promises to be an easy one. We only need to abandon the idea of perfection and instead just show up as our real selves. Or our real shape. Sorry, Glennon. Bit of poetic license there for us, but there we go. Neena, amazing, amazing, as always, my love. Big kiss to the family and thank you so much. And to Percy.
So that's where we'll leave today's conversation, with the reminder that becoming isn't about striving for perfection. It's about noticing who we are, allowing what wants to emerge, and choosing growth one step at a time as we make our way around the wheel, the splat, the shape. This season, you'll be hearing more from brilliant guests, sharing stories and insights and practical ways to bring balance into our lives. For now, thank you for listening to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with someone who might find it useful, and keep reflecting on where your balance is and isn't. Next week, we'll be joined by the wonderful Wise Water duo of Katie McShane and Elaine Moynihan. They run a social enterprise based in Cork that delivers wellbeing and water workshops to schools, workplaces and community groups. We'll be talking with them about the impact our environment and the environment have on our wellbeing. See you next week.